Have you ever been to a place that just like radiates history?
Yeah, for sure.
You can just feel it in the air.
Absolutely.
That's the feeling I get when I think about Shaniwar Wada in Pune. Like, imagine being in the heart of like this really powerful empire and like the place where the Peshwas lived, who controlled like this huge chunk of territory. That's where we're going today.
Yeah, and the sources we're looking at today, they really make Shaniwar Wada come to life. And even the name itself kind of tells us a little bit about the fort, The foundation stone was laid on a Saturday in 1723. And get this, Bajirao Peshwa moved in on a Saturday in 1732.
Whoa, wild.
So they named it Shaniwar Wada. Shaniwar means Saturday, and Wada is a Marathi word that means a residential complex. I guess that day must have been pretty important to them.
Yeah, must have been a lucky day for them. So our goal today is not to like bog you down with a bunch of dates and names. No, we really want to unearth the cool stories, like the stuff that makes you go, wow, I can't believe that happened. And, focus on why this place is so important. It's kind of like we're giving you a personal tour, just hitting the highlights.
Exactly. A curated experience for you guys. Let's start with the layout of the fort. Okay. The entrance itself is a great example of how people thought about defense back then. It's not like you can just walk straight in. There's this big wall that forces you to turn left or right.
Interesting.
It's really smart. This would have slowed down an attacking army big time, especially if they were charging on horseback, which was a pretty common tactic back then.
Okay, so they were already thinking ahead with the design. Like they were anticipating these cavalry charges.
Exactly. They're thinking ahead.
And I read that the original plan was to build the whole fort out of stone. But then they ended up only using stone for the ground floor, and the rest they used brick. Was the story there? Why the change in plans?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our sources say there were some objections to using stone for the upper levels, so they switched to brick instead. I wonder what those objections were, though. Maybe it was like super expensive, or it would have taken forever to get all that stone, or maybe there was like some other reason we don't even know about.
Totally. I guess we can only speculate, but it makes you think. And it's not just the materials, right? The defenses they built into this place were pretty ingenious. So like when you look at the walls, you'll see all these holes. Some are rectangular, some are circular, some are square. And you might think, just some random holes. But no, these holes had a seriously deadly purpose. Defenders could pour hot oil or shoot arrows through them at anyone trying to climb the walls. I'm guessing the different shapes help them aim in different directions too. Like they really thought this through.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about how huge this fort used to be. There were 7 floors in total.
Wow.
But a lot of it's gone now. Just pieces remain. But hey, if you ever go visit, they say the stairs are in pretty good shape still.
Good to know.
So as you're walking around, you'll come across 6 main gates, and each one had its own special purpose. The main entrance, they called it the Delhi Darwaza. Which makes sense, right? Delhi was a pretty important city back then, the seat of Mughal power, so it makes sense they'd orient the fort that way. And then there's this other gate, the Ganesh Darwaza, which is massive. I mean, seriously big. They say about 10 soldiers could walk through it side by side. That would have been super important for getting troops in and out quickly during an attack.
So it was like a strategic choke point, like you
Right.
said, 10 soldiers wide.
Exactly. And then there's this walkway that runs along the top of the walls. Back then, the area around the fort was wide open, so you could see for miles from up there. Imagine the guards patrolling up there, keeping an eye out for any trouble. It's kind of crazy to think about that now with the city all around it.
So you have this super well-designed fort meant to withstand like any attack from the outside. But then what about threats from the inside? Like what about the events that led up to the assassination of Narayanrao? It seems crazy that something like that could happen in such a fortified place. What factors allowed for such a thing to occur?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to understand that, we have to take a look at how power worked in the Maratha Empire. So at first, the Chhatrapati was like the top dog, the supreme authority. And the Peshwa was kind of like his second in command, appointed by the Chhatrapati. But over time, the Peshwaship became hereditary, passed down through the family.
That makes sense, like a dynasty.
Yeah, exactly. And this changed everything about who had the power. Basically, all the power ended up in the hands of the Peshwa family.
So that could be good for stability. But like you said, there's always that risk of infighting.
Exactly. When power gets concentrated, you can have some real problems.
Totally. And that brings us to Bajirao, the first Peshwa to really hold significant power. Our sources highlight that he really expanded the Maratha territory. I mean, he was a force to be reckoned with. And his personal life is pretty interesting, too. 2 wives, Kashi Bai and Mastani, and several sons who all played a role in shaping the empire. There was Balaji Bajirao, also known as Nanasaheb Raghunath, and Shamsher Badar, the son of Mastani. So much family drama mixed with like empire-level politics.
Yeah, it's like a soap opera, but with real consequences. And after Bajirao I died, his eldest son, Balaji Bajirao Nanasaheb, took over as Peshwa. And he had a pretty big challenge right off the bat. Ahmad Shah Durrani was invading from Afghanistan, heading towards Delhi. It was a serious threat to the whole Maratha Confederacy.
So what did Nanasaheb do? How did she deal with this Afghan invasion?
Well, first he thought about sending his younger brother, Raghunath, who had a lot of experience fighting in the north. But Raghunath wanted a lot of resources, money, soldiers, the whole shebang, maybe more than Nanasaheb thought was wise or could even afford at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to just throw everything you've got at the first sign of trouble. You got to think strategically.
Exactly. And then another player enters the scene, Sadashiv Rao, Nanasaheb's cousin. And he's like, I'll do it. I'll lead the army, and I can do it with fewer resources. He thought they could pick up more men and supplies along the way by forming alliances with other rulers. A different approach, right? More about diplomacy and less about brute force.
And then you have Nanasaheb's wife, who had a different idea altogether. She thought their son Vishwas Rao should be the official leader of the campaign. Her reasoning was that if Sadashiv Rao led the army to a major victory in Delhi, he might try to grab more power for himself. But if their son was technically in charge, it would reinforce the power of the Peshwa family.
It was all about keeping the power within the family, maintaining their legitimacy. And in the end, the group that marched north included all three, Vishwas Rao, Sadashiv Rao, and Shamsher Bahadur. A real family affair. You can see how invested they were in stopping the Afghans. But unfortunately, it didn't go well. The Third Battle of Panipat in 1761 was a disaster for the Marathas. All three of them died in the battle. A real tragedy.
Wow. So Nanasaheb lost his cousin and his brother all in one battle. That's devastating. And I imagine it created a huge power vacuum. Who would become the next Peshwa?
It was a real crisis. Some people thought Raghunath Rao was the obvious choice. He had the experience, the leadership skills. Others thought the Peshwaship should stay within Nanasaheb's immediate family. It was a tough decision. But before he died, Nanasaheb chose his second son, Madhav Rao, to be the next Peshwa. Raghunath Rao was not happy about that at all. I mean, he really thought he deserved to be Peshwa.
That makes sense. I mean, it's a lot of power to just watch slip away.
Totally. And things got really bad between them. Raghunath Rao even teamed up with the Nizam of Hyderabad to attack Madhav Rao. It just shows you how intense these power struggles could be.
So all this tension within the family really set the stage for the tragedy that happened next.
You're talking about the murder of Narayanrao Rao?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems like Madhav Rao knew his uncle was ambitious because he put him under house arrest before he died. And when Narayanrao Rao became Peshwa, he kept his uncle under house arrest too, just to be safe.
Yeah, Raghunath Rao tried to escape a bunch of times, but it never worked. He was getting desperate. And that's when his wife, Anandibai, comes into the story. She's a key player in all this.
And her plan involved the Gardi guards who were stationed at Shaniwar Wada. Now, these guards were like professional soldiers, hired from North India. They were tough and skilled, but their loyalty was basically to whoever paid them.
And they hadn't been paid in a while. The Peshwa was having money problems, and the guards were owed a lot of back pay. So Anandibai saw an opportunity there.
A way to exploit the situation.
Exactly. She contacted Sumar Singh, the leader of the Gardi, and made him an offer. She said if he followed a written order from Raghunath Rao, she'd make sure he got all the back pay, plus some extra rewards, and a top position under Raghunath Rao when he became Peshwa. It was a pretty tempting offer.
So she gives Sumar Singh this letter with Raghunath Rao's official seal on it. And the letter says Narayan Ladarava.
Which means capture Narayan Rao. Sounds straightforward enough.
But here's the thing. Before she gave the letter to Sumar Singh, Anandibai changed one little word. She changed the Rava, which means capture, to Marzvai, which means kill. Just one letter changed, and the whole meaning of the order changes completely.
It's a chilling detail. That one tiny change had enormous consequences.
So the Gardis, they think they're following orders from Raghunath Rao. They seal off the fort, trapping Narayan Rao inside. And it all happens in broad daylight. Imagine the chaos.
Narayan Rao knew he was in danger. He went to Parvatibai, Sadashiv Rao's widow, and begged for help. But it was no use. In a moment of pure desperation, he ran to his uncle, crying out, Kaka Vachva, which means, Uncle, save me. Can you imagine that? Pleading for your life to your own uncle in your own home.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And how did Raghunath Rao react?
It's strange. According to the sources, he drew his sword and yelled that nobody would touch Narayanrao while he was there.
So he was protecting him.
Yeah, but then Anandavibai steps in again. She reminds him of all the times he'd been passed over for the Peshwaship, all the disrespect he'd endured. And she's like, basically, why are you protecting these people who have treated you so badly?
And that was it. He just gave in.
Sadly, yeah. He lowered his sword. And then two of the Gardi Sumar Singh and Khadak Singh murdered Narayanrao right there in front of him. They say the gate closest to where it happened is now called Narayan Darwaza, a permanent reminder of the tragedy. Yeah, it was a complete shock. The people loyal to the Peshwa were furious. Eventually, one of the ministers was allowed inside and saw Narayan Rao's body in Raghunath Rao's room. Right away, people started suspecting that Raghunath Rao was involved. It was a huge scandal.
And this is where Ram Shastri Prabhini comes in.
Exactly. He was the Maratha Chief Justice, a man known for his honesty and fairness. He was the one who had to investigate this whole mess. And it was a big deal. I mean, this wasn't some petty crime. This was the murder of a sitting Peshwa, something that had never happened before in Maratha history.
Wow. So how did the investigation play out?
Well, while Ram Shastri was doing his thing, Raghunath Rao was trying to take control. He wanted to be the next Peshwa. But people were divided. Some supported him, some didn't. They were worried he was involved in the murder, and they wanted someone else to take over.
So who were the other contenders?
There were two main possibilities. First, there was Narayanrao's widow, who was pregnant at the time. If she had a son, he would be the rightful heir. And then there was Ali Bahadur, the son of Mastani and Bajirao the son. He had a strong claim, too, because of his lineage.
So it was a real power struggle.
Oh, yeah. And then Ram Shastri found something big, the altered letter. Apparently, one of Narayan Rao's maidservants got it from one of the Gardi guards.
They had proof that the order had been changed.
Exactly, and they knew Raghunath Rao's seal was on the letter. So on the day Raghunath Rao was supposed to become Peshwa, Ram Shastri presented the letter in court. It was a huge moment. Everyone was watching.
Talk about dramatic.
Totally. Raghunath Rao said he didn't order the murder. He said he only wanted Narayan Rao captured. And he blamed Anandibai for changing the letter.
But it didn't work.
No. The court didn't believe him. They saw the letter. They saw the seal. They knew he was responsible for what happened, so he didn't become Peshwa.
Wow. So what happened next?
A group of ministers got together and asked the Chhatrapati to intervene. They needed someone to take charge and settle things down, and the Chhatrapati agreed. He said Raghunath Rao's claim to the Peshwaship was invalid.
So they basically stripped him of his power.
Exactly. And then Narayan Rao's widow gave birth to a son, Sawai Madhav Rao. And even though he was just a baby, he was made the new Peshwa. Of course, the ministers had to run things until he was old enough.
Wow. So this whole saga really shows you how power, ambition, and betrayal can shake even the strongest empires. And it all happened right there in Shaniwar Wada, this grand fort that witnessed it all.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how it's still standing today. And there's even a college right next to it, H.V. Desai College of Commerce, Arts and Science. Kind of a cool juxtaposition of old and new.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that history is always present, even as the world changes around us. And for anyone who might be in Pune, you can actually visit Shaniwar Wada. It's open from 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. It's a chance to walk through those gates and feel the weight of history all around you.
It's not just a building, it's a time capsule, full of stories of power and intrigue.
Right. It's a reminder that Shaniwar Wada is so much more than bricks and mortar. It's a place where history really came alive, a place where power struggles, betrayal, and even murder played out on a grand scale.
And what strikes me is how these seemingly small details had such a huge impact, like manipulating the guards by playing on their financial troubles and then that one word change in the letter. It's crazy how something so small could lead to such a drastic outcome.
It really makes you think about how easily things can spiral out of control. One little decision, one moment of weakness, one act of deception can change the course of history. And for those listening today who like learning about history in a way that's both in-depth and engaging, I think we've achieved that goal. We've taken a deep dive into this really complex event and brought it to life without getting too bogged down in the details.
Yeah, hopefully you guys learned something new and interesting today. And it makes you wonder, right? How many times throughout history has something like this happened? Where a little lie or a personal ambition has had massive ripple effects shaping empires and changing destinies. It's a question worth pondering.
For sure. And it also makes you think about the importance of justice and accountability. Even when powerful people are involved, the truth needs to come out, and those responsible need to be held accountable. It's a lesson that's relevant no matter what era you live in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our exploration of Shaniwar Wada. It's been a fascinating journey through history, full of intrigue, betrayal, and ultimately tragedy. But it's also a story that reminds us of the power of human choices and the enduring impact they have on the world around us.
So true. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
See you.